Hello and welcome to the Backtracking episode proper for the Agonist, and we will start with the band's debut album titled Once Only Imagined. Released in 2007 through Century Media Records, it would be produced by the band themselves alongside one Christian Donaldson. I don't have a lot to say about this album that I didn't cover in my very brief history video, but one of the songs from this album, Business Suits and Combat Boots, had a video that was directed by legendary metal video director David Brodsky. This album doesn't start with that song, but the instrumental track titled Synopsis, so really it starts with the next song after that titled Rise and Fall. It's a pretty good showing of the band's particular strain of death metal with some good melody to it and a little White Glizzard's vocals just sounding great. But one thing that I like even more is how it's handled in the production end. At the time of recording, only Alyssa, Danny Marino and Chris Kells were members of the band, and Derek Nader was pretty much just a studio drummer for the album. Speaking about the style again though, I'm surprised that it was handled with this much care. For me, the melodic death metal style can be hit or miss, especially with female vocalists, but it's things like this that convince me that Alyssa can get away with murdering a voice box, as well as possible actual murder. It's got some nice moments from an instrumental and structural standpoint too, with a solidly consistent style that has a lot of really good switches that are justified in the album's relatively short runtime. And lyrically it has a good message against things like corruption, modern society, and how humankind are idiots, basically, because, you know, we is. And my favourite song goes to Serendipity. Once Only Imagined might have a humble background, but it comes out looking and feeling a lot bigger than it is, with a lot of good factors to back that claim up. Next is the band's second album, Lullabies for the Dormant Mind. Released in 2009, it would again come out through Century Media, and it would again be produced by the band themselves alongside Christian Donaldson, again. So yeah, Once Only Imagined went well for the band, and they got to tour with the likes of Sonata Arctica, Enslaved and Overkill among others. But while touring in the Rocky Mountains, a blizzard there would damage their equipment trailer and they had to stop touring for a brief spell. But obviously they recovered and got this album out, starting with the song The Tempest, in brackets the siren song The Banshees Cry. And bugging me is the theatricality for this one off the charts. I mean, the first one was heavy but had a lot of melody to it as well, but for this one the band just decided to chuck a lot of that out the window, and that makes me very, very, very happy. They get Yuri Raymond, formerly of the band Cryptopsy, to perform on the song, and their eulogy sang me to sleep, and there are other guest musicians which provide really nice piano and violin work too. It's so fast-paced and brilliantly performed, like the band were hopped up on some substance, and the instrumental work bounces off each other gorgeously here. That could be due to being a four-piece by the time of this album, and it's their first album with Simon McKay, who does really amazing work on the drums. And the lyrics get a bit bombastic and weird and dark too, with topics like betrayal, self-loathing, anger and heartbreak, and the delightful experimentation with the structuring, adding new elements of sound and thrash, opera and black metal really fit in with the overall mould of the sound. My favourite song goes to Martyr Art. Lullabies is a great follow-up to a great debut, and the heavier, darker, lean, seamless implementation of new genres and amazing performances really seal this one for me. Next is the band's third album, Prisoners. Same record label, same producers, but this would be the band's first album with 5 members, as we get rhythm guitarist Pascal Paco Jobin. So in support of Lullabies, the band hit up a lot of Latin American and Asian territories, and in 2011 they would take place in the pandemonium over North America tour, with the exception of Danny Marino, who was sick at the time. The band would also release the Escape EP, the title track of which would be reworked onto Prisoners. Speaking of, the album starts with the song You're Coming With Me, and yeah, it certainly sounds like a The Agonist album. It kicks off with some more in-your-face metalcore with some groove and melodic death metal elements, and also some prog metal which manages to not crawl up its own ass. Very surprising for the genre. But because of that, it does lend a new level of technicality that the band had never really showcased before, and the album feels a lot more intelligently crafted as a result. Considering how big Lullabies became for the band, and how that album showed some of their more daring and experimental tendencies, that is a really good sign for what you're going to get here if you listen to Prisoners. This one isn't as experimental in that sense, but it's also still as risky to attempt and definitely still as heavy, feeling like maybe the most metalcore leaning album but done in a really interesting way. The band helping to produce further adds to those interesting elements, and their performances are once again damn near faultless, and again the lyrics are sort of conceptualized and dark about religious falsehood, loneliness, disbelief, and the overarching theme of feeling locked inside your own head, hence The Prisoner. My favourite song goes to Lonely Solipsist. God, these song titles are fun to say. Next up is the band's fourth album, Eye of Providence. Released in 2015 and produced by the same people, it would be the band's last through Century Media, and it's also their first with current lead vocalist Vicky Sarakis? Vicky. So after Prisoners, the band got busy touring again, sharing the stage with the likes of Danzig and Corrosion of Conformity during a 2013 tour. Then in 2014, Alyssa White Glizzard replaced former Arch Enemy singer Angela Gosso, leaving the Agonist behind, and her spot was soon filled by Vicky Saragis. I'll talk more about this later, but let's start here with the first song on the album, titled Gates of Horn and Ivory. From the start, this isn't an immediately obvious change for the Agonist in that it's awesome metalcore with a healthy smattering of melodeath, but without as much experimentation this time around. However, that's not a bad thing, and I personally love the fact that Vicky isn't trying to sound like Alyssa on this one. And hell, they still have all of the tools that made all of their work up to this point so good, and Vicky is literally the only new member of the band for this one, so that's great. And yeah, it doesn't have the out-there ballsiness of their previous 2 albums, but it's still very much fast-paced in its structuring with more of a focus on melody. I think that Vicky sings more here than Alyssa did across the band's first 3 albums, and it's a change that I welcome with open arms, honestly. The production is still slick, and the rest of the band still sound great too, with fantastic chemistry and more guitar solos, which I really enjoy, and the lyrics seem conceptual in a way, telling the story of a corrupt queen, and using that scope to speak about things like betrayal, redemption, and death, keeping the band's penchant for dark storytelling. My favourite song goes to A Necessary Evil. Eye of Providence had a lot to live up to, and it pays off massively, with Vicky Sirokas fitting comfortably into the unenviable position as the Agonist's new frontwoman. Next is the band's fifth album, 5. Released in 2016, it would be the band's first album through Napalm Records, and it would be produced by the band themselves alongside new producer Mike Plotnikoff. I don't have as much to steal from the wiki for this one's info, but I'll just say that it's surprising that the band put out an album this fast after their last one. It's the shortest time gap, and considering that this album is over 15 minutes long and that the band switched labels and got a new producer for this one, that's quite the leap. Every song on the album starts with the word "the", and this album starts with the song "The Moment", and much like how the Agonist first three albums set the tone with Alyssa, this one continues to set the tone with Vicky. She continues the more melodious singing that the band brought on for Eye of Providence, and she adds more screaming as well, actually sounding better in that department for this one. And yeah, the band still sound great, but there's something that doesn't quite feel all there. Don't get me wrong, this album is still good and it does try some new stuff, but it doesn't feel like as much of a progression from the last one in terms of its style. It's good female-fronted death, and that's sort of all that it is. It's not even that Plotnikoff was a bad producer, but I feel like there's not as much left to breathe on this one. To be fair, that's a big problem we've noticed in a lot of Napalm's production, but that's probably just me. Probably. I do appreciate that there's more restraint and such, but it feels a bit forced at times, and the lyrics lack that storytelling bite of last time while still talking sort of about the same stuff as usual, with nothing super interesting happening to change it. My favourite song goes to The Villain. The album has some nice moments, but it just feels too par for the course by the band at times, which is not something that they can really get away with despite how good they are. It feels a bit too phoned in, definitely more than it should be. And finally, we reach the band's sixth album, Orphans, released in 2019. Conflicting sources say that it either came out through Napalm again or through new label Rodeo Star, and it was produced by the band again with Christian Donaldson returning. Thank God for that. So this one doesn't even have a damn page on the wiki to steal from, which is a damn shame as this is a really damn good album, damn it. I feel like I gave my opinions away on this one already, so I'll try to cover some background for it. It was announced in mid-2019 with the first single titled In Vertigo, which is also the first track on the album proper. It's also more new ground for the band as it begins with what sounds like a choir and symphonic elements, which was a path that the band had never really trodden down before. This album is also, surprisingly, one of their shorter offerings despite the 3-year time gap, but oh my god does it make every moment of its 40ish minute long length count. Orphans has the band's signature sense of pacing again, and it feels so strongly put together with what it does, and the new elements again just fit into everything like they'd always been there. It legitimately feels like the energy that they wanted to unleash on 5 but never got the chance to just comes all out on Orphans, and it's great. Vicky puts in maybe her career best vocal performance, at least with The Agonist, and the instrumental work just stomps your face into the mud while tingling your ears pleasantly at the same time. And yes, there's a sentence I just said, and wrote, and said, so woo. And damn, the lyrics on this one too, subjects like abuse, self-confidence, corruption, greed, loneliness. Such a wide spectrum is covered on this album, all tonally consistent and not being too bleak or too saccharine. It's a really delicately struck balance. My favourite song goes to A Devil Made Me Do It. I wish that I'd heard this one last year because holy crap, it's great. It probably would have made my top 20 at least. It's great at pretty much everything that it needs to do, and everything that should work works fucking wonders, mate. So, that's it for this episode. How did you feel? Were you opening your eyes to the Providence, or did these guys sound a bit more like a lullaby? I know where I stand, to be fair. It's definitely more on the former. Next time, for Backtracking at least, is my first 2-part episode of this half of the season, as I will cover New Brunswick, New Jersey's own The Screaming Females, but I will see before that because tonight is going to be Over the Top 2, with the Over the Top Rumble. That's going to be fucking great, and yeah, just keep an eye out for that if you are a person who watches my stuff. I don't know why you would, but as always, thank you for watching, you're awesome, bye bye.